Hi there, it's June the 16th and we're continuing our voyage through the book of 1 Kings, and we're finishing off chapter 15 and coming into chapters 16 and 17. Really, chapters 15 and 16 focus on the terrible decline of the house of Israel, while Judah in the south is being ruled over by the descendants of Rehoboam, and particularly by Asa, who is a good king, but in the north things are going from bad to worse. First of all, Nadav succeeds Jeroboam, and he reigns for a while, but then he is slain by Baasha, who is from the house of Issachar. And Baasha actually manages to reign for 24 years, but a prophet named Jehu prophesies against Baasha because of what he's done, because of the violence that he's done. He says that his house will also suffer violence. And sure enough, after Baasha dies, after a 24-year reign, his son Elah comes in his stead, but he is assassinated by his captain of the guard when he's drunk at their capital Tirzah, and Zimri is the name of the guy who takes over, having killed Elah. But Zimri only lasts 7 days, and he is attacked by Omri, who is claiming the kingship in his stead, because after all Zimri has taken the throne by force. So the people rise against Zimri, and after only 7 days, Zimri, besieged in Tirzah, burns the palace down over himself and commits suicide. Omri then becomes king of half of the people, but the other half of the people are, there's an attempt by a man called Tivni to take the throne, and so there's a division within Israel itself. And then Omri manages to overcome Tivni, and so he actually takes back the whole rulership of Israel, and it's Omri that establishes the capital, the new capital, in what the Hebrew calls Shomron, the place of defense, the watchtower, and we know as Samaria. And so Omri has finally established the capital in Samaria, where it will remain for a long time to come. And Omri is then, when he dies, Omri is succeeded by one of the most notorious of the kings of Israel, Ahab, or Ahab as we know him. And Ahab marries a Sidonian princess, a princess from the coastal region, and her father is Ed Baal, and by his name we can tell that their family and their religion is Baalism. And Baal means master, is the pagan fertility god, and Jezebel is the woman who he marries, and she brings the whole Baal cult with her. And this is going to lead to a great contest, in a sense, or a great decision for the nation between whether they serve Baal under Ahab and Jezebel, or whether they serve God, championed particularly by the man who we meet in the next chapter, in chapter 17, Eliyahu, or Elijah as we know him. So right at the end of chapter 16, by the way, there's a mention of the rebuilding of Jericho. Now, it was said that whoever builds Jericho would be cursed, and this is perhaps a sign of the decline of the nation, that now Jericho, which has been knocked down, defeated by God in the entering into the promised land, now is reestablished by a man called Hiel. The beginning of the chapter 17, we encounter then Eliyahu, Elijah, a prophet, and he's one of the most powerful figures in the Old Testament, in the scriptures. Elijah comes and he addresses Ahab, and he says there's going to be no rain other than by my word. And so there comes this terrible drought. During this time, God protects Eliyahu, he protects Elijah by taking him to the brook Kerit, which we call Cherith. It means a cut, and there he's looked after and fed by ravens who bring him meat and bread, and he drinks from the brook until the brook dries up. And then he goes out of Israel to a place called Sarfat, and he goes to the house of a widow. And in this well-known story, the widow and her son are there, and she has very little food, and she's about to cook her last meal and die. But Eliyahu prophesies that they won't die, that God's going to miraculously continue the oil and the meal, and so he does, and so they survive. And so under God's direct provision, miraculous provision, Eliyahu and the widow of Sarfat and her son continue to live. However, her son, the widow's son, becomes ill and dies. And then an amazing miracle. In fact, in the first raising from the dead in the scriptures, Eliyahu sees her son raised from the dead, and by prayer, by his prayer. So here's a sign of God's intervention. The first time in the scriptures we see of someone being raised from death, speaking of the one who is the one that the Hebrew prayer calls Mechayeh Metim, the one who brings the dead to life. And of course we know that in Christ we're going to see not just the dead raised to life, but the whole promise of resurrection for all come to pass. So we can see that Eliyahu, that Elijah, is going to turn things around for Israel and call them back to God. Have a very good June the 16th.